So for Link vs. Cloud 2's review, I'm not going to be doing anything but the original alongside it, just for that video. I want to be able to directly compare these two episodes, which are the same matchup, back to back. Instead, today, in preparation for that upcoming episode and review, I'm going to be looking at every other Legend of Zelda episode on Death Battle. Every other Final Fantasy episode has been talked about and are in other reviews, so let's just take a look at these 3 Legend of Zelda episodes.
Hear that, Kratos? A chick beat you to it, like any good woman should.
Peach vs. Zelda is an episode that I used to really dislike, and now I just regularly, middly dislike. I think the most noteworthy thing about this episode is that it's flat out disrespectful to both characters. It starts out by calling Peach and Zelda 2 of the most worthless damsels in distress, which, you know, you can call a character worthless if it's something like Dan vs. Hercule, where that's the point of their characters, but these two are explicitly some of the least worthless damsels in distress. They're not April O'Neil from the 1987 series, where they do nothing but get kidnapped all the time. Peach has an entire game where she gets to be a badass, and Zelda has helped Link fight Ganon in multiple installments. But the analysis also sort of comes off as wrong. Zelda is characterized as a manipulator who's tricking Link into helping her out in a sort of malicious way, while Peach, meanwhile, gets hit with a nice heaping helping of misogyny. Wonderful. And you know, one single joke like, Boomstick is a misogynist and this is a bit of edgy humor would be one thing. I think people should be allowed to make jokes about what they think is funny as long as it's not actively sending a harmful message. But in this one, there's also 2 instances of him saying these princesses need to put out already. Link and Mario save the day, ergo, they deserve for these princesses to get a good dicking from them. Because it's not like Link and Mario can be heroes, and it's not like, you know, those dickings might have happened off screen, because we're not going to get a Witcher 3 fuck off in a Nintendo game for kids. I'll admit, I did like Boomstick laughing at the Vibe Scepter though, I mean, that's about how I would react to that. And it's not that all the jokes are bad. I like Boomstick greatly oversimplifying the Peach Mega Strike at the end, and honestly, there is something baffling about how they describe the Mega Strike though. Clearly what would happen if you kick a soccer ball with 165,000 newtons is that you'd get the power to convert energy into mass and produce 3 whole soccer balls. That's basic logic, isn't it? But no, seriously, this is not a feat like a guy hits someone and it causes a big explosion or a shockwave, which you can calculate because there is a reason behind that. A lot of energy causes big explosion, that's how logic works. This is a magic kick that creates soccer balls. I don't see how that is something you can calculate, unless you somehow calculated mass energy conversion or whatever bullshit like that. The fight itself is fine. I mean, obviously Zelda here is one of the ugliest looking characters in any Death Battle animation, perhaps the ugliest, but the fight itself is mostly just okay. I like the slap fight and how it ends with a fucking frying pan to the face. I like the battle when they're falling. I like the way Zelda throwing the sheep back at Peach is animated and how that sets up the Chekhov's gun for later in the animation when it drops on Zelda. But most of the animation is just on autopilot for me, and the ending is just weird. I like how bloody the final blow is though. And I just don't find it interesting. I guess it's weird how Zelda was very much Smash Zelda and did not represent much of an actual character from the Legend of Zelda series, but this is far from the worst example of that we'll be seeing in this review. I am struggling to find things I really care enough about to mention in the fight. It's like mostly just a big old vapid hunk of nothing. I don't know, like 5 out of 10 I guess. It's just boring.
Ganon could only be killed by Booster Gold.
What the fuck is this? I know this is a widely disliked episode, but I wanted to give it a chance to impress me like Shadow vs. Vegeta did, and okay, so Bowser vs. Ganon is certainly an episode, and it's not one without any positives at all, like some would lead you to think. I found some of the jokes in the analysis funny. Honestly, for the most part, I enjoyed Bowser's analysis. They gave him a monicum of respect, they had some sort of funny jokes, and for the most part I don't have an issue with Ganondorf's. But there's one part I have to single out because it's kind of sneaky, and you might know what it is. It is the most remembered and most infamous part of this entire episode, possibly even this entire season. There are some that are just as infamous, but this is one of the ones that you still hear a lot. That is the no limits fallacy. In fact, this is the episode that, to my knowledge, really started to get the community talk about no limits fallacies. I don't remember hearing that term nearly as much prior to this episode as I did after. Ganon's holy weapon weakness was worded in a very, very specific way. Listen how it's described in the analysis and conclusion.
But while the Triforce of Power supposedly grants him immortality, Ganon can still be slain, and is specifically vulnerable to holy weapons like the Master Sword. Bowser and Ganon were nearly invulnerable to typical means of harm. Ganon could only be killed by holy weapons like the Master Sword and Silver Arrows, so while Bowser could hurt him, he couldn't exactly kill him.
I don't like that. There is a difference between can still be slain and is particularly vulnerable to holy weapons, and can only be killed by holy weapons. The latter is an absolute, so clearly Wizards are Sith. There is only one way to interpret it. The former is not. The former is not an absolute at all. It can be interpreted as Ganondorf can be killed but only with holy weapons, but you can also interpret it as Ganon is specifically vulnerable to holy weapons but is not immune to everything else. Clearly, Death Battle at this point in time believed that Ganondorf can only be killed by holy weapons, but wanted to word it in a way in the analysis that made it so people weren't sure of who would win. Obviously, because there's no tension if you know that Death Battle considers Ganondorf immune to everything that's not a holy weapon. But it's still kind of really badly done. Speaking of bad wording, let's really look at what they said about Bowser in the ending as well. This is not something you see brought up much. The points about Bowser having more strength than Ganondorf, but Ganondorf being smarter and having more magic are fine. You can argue whether or not those points are true, but within the confines of just the episode, nothing is being contradicted here. But what they say about his durability is just as strange to me as Ganondorf's. Listen.
Meanwhile, Bowser could survive almost anything. Almost. In New Super Mario Bros. DS, after falling into some kind of super lava, it's gotta be since he survived molten dips before unscathed, he became Dry Bowser. And after a strong enough impact, not even his own magic could reassemble his body.
So that's what they said, right? Essentially, what they've said is, Bowser could survive almost anything. Unless it's higher than his durability, which is no shit, Sherlock. Anyone can survive anything that can't hurt them. In the analysis and conclusion, they never brought up that his magic could reassemble his body. In fact, Dry Bowser isn't brought up at all beyond right at the end, and in the analysis he can survive as a skeleton, which they never attribute to his magical abilities. For all we know, without any knowledge of Bowser, this could just be something natural to him. So the point of not even his own magic could reassemble his body is kind of lost, considering we haven't even been told that his magic could do that in the first place. Secondly, the super lava thing is weird. Sure, maybe this lava is more potent than the lava he's previously survived, but do you guys remember the durability feat you gave him earlier?
He's withstood a point-blank supernova and being sucked into a black hole. Multiple times!
So this lava is stronger and hotter than a supernova? I feel like there's an issue here that feels like a bit of an anti-feat, but you also can't bring up a feat that is he can survive as a skeleton, but then later say that that same feat is actually a downfall in that once you become that skeleton, he's so weak that he can go from surviving supernovas to being killed by a guy whose best feat you gave was surviving a castle falling on him. It makes the he can survive in any temperature, even without skin, seem less like a feat when what you really mean is, he can survive as a skeleton, but also now he is so weak that falling down some stairs would kill him. Oh yeah, also, they never bring up Decay as one of Ganondorf's abilities until the conclusion. The only mention of the Curse of Decay and shit is just saying he can cast curses, with no explanation of what curses are. Then there's the fight, and it's not great. Remember how Zelda was almost entirely betrayed with her Smash moveset? Well, that's at least understandable, given her Smash moveset, while almost entirely original to Smash, is fitting with her characterization as a magician. I could see this being how she fights. Ganondorf, however, is infamously not represented very well in Smash, and as fun as he really is fun in Smash, at least in Ultimate, he does play as just a beefier Captain Falcon in terms of his moveset. And that's how he feels in this episode. In fact, Bowser also is mostly a Smash moveset, but he does get in moments to be otherwise. The only abilities Ganon uses that aren't pulled from Smash is teleporting, shooting light balls, and decaying Bowser. For the most part, he's all brawler. But Bowser, he gets to throw hammers, and he gets to play tennis, he gets to use the clown copter. Yeah, Ganondorf, you remember those powers that I mentioned for him, you know? Summoning helper phantoms, freezing people in darkness, being able to wield multiple swords? He doesn't do that. And the fight itself is strangely paced. It starts fine, Bowser and Ganon size each other up and show off their brute strength, but then Ganondorf kicks Bowser into the air, and right as the fight starts to have some pace, it pauses for a joke. And while I'm not against pausing for a joke, in fact I can do that right now. Hey Wiz! Yeah? I fucked your mom! That's right, Boomstick. It's just weird that the fight was setting itself up, and then immediately we got this joke that kills the pacing, and then we go back to the action. I get the idea of showing Bowser as a fucking moron and the JoJo reference, but why? Bowser kicks Ganondorf out of the castle, and we do get the best scene, which is a tennis fight. It's funny, it fits both characters, it references both Mario tennis games and Ganondorf's Ocarina of Time boss battle. I think this is actually a really good scene, especially with how this is the last time Bowser gains the advantage in the entire fight, with the only other time Bowser seems to be winning the battle being his preceding dropkick. Anything before that dropkick and after the tennis fight is all the Ganondorf show, and that's just dandy, isn't it? It's not like just Ganondorf steals a show, it's literally Ganondorf does everything. Sadly, even when Bowser does get to use his clown car and size changing, it doesn't help him at all. Ganondorf wall-up punches the clown car's marble back at it, and then just blocks one of Bowser's only two attacks as Big Boy Bowser. The other attack is dodged by Ganon's spear, but wait, did Ganon dodge it too? Was Bowser just shooting at the spear? Because like he shoots it, the spear dodges, we never see what happens to Ganon, and then suddenly it's gone in the next shot. Though, you could say that's irrelevant, because outside of the generally cool shot of Bowser swinging his arm and being blocked by Ganon, everything with Ganon kind of stinks. He looks bad and unfitting because his sprites clearly weren't made for this style of animation, to the point where you can visibly tell that the spear he throws is a 2D sprite being angled in a funny way, and all Ganon does himself is block a hit, stab Bowser's eye, and stand in a funny way before getting vored. And look, I like the idea of the death, but the sudden jarring change between the sprites of Bowser and Dry Bowser is very noticeable and distracting, as well as the fact that Ganon is apparently even smaller than Ganondorf, based at least on how he sizes up compared to the previous shot of Bowser and how big Ganondorf was next to Bowser. So outside of one shot and one scene, I didn't enjoy the fight. I enjoyed the analysis for the most part, and I disliked the conclusion. Quite a spectrum of emotions, seeing as how I dislike half the episode. But the thing is that I dislike that half more than I like the other half. So the bad really outweighs the good here. All in all, a solid 3 out of 10 episode. It's not very good, and it sucks with Bowser that this is the case.
I'm no mere pile of secrets.
Oh, Ganondorf vs. Dracula. You're one of the episodes that I feel I judged too harshly back in my old Season 6 retrospective. And honestly, while I don't love you as much as some other people do, I have come around more or less. It's not without its flaws, but none of those flaws are with the analysis. Well, okay, there is one issue with the analysis. Rooster Teeth straight up pirated footage from the Castlevania series on Netflix. Why? Anyway, I actually really enjoyed the analysis segment. I think the balance of story versus analysis and jokes was good, and the 2 cutaways I enjoyed. I liked seeing the 2 laughing together, and I liked Wiz's "I got out the next day," and I always like when Boomstick pulls out the glasses and pointer. It adds a hit more personality to him that I just really like. And overall, yeah, I just like the analysis a lot more than the other 2 episodes. I was invested, interested in seeing what the next thing they talk about is, I was chuckling at some of the jokes, and I liked the overall presentation. The lines flowed and segued into each other very well, it was generally solid. The animation then, well, I still think it has some very unfortunately janky moments, but most notably they're at the start, such as Ganondorf punching Dracula here and the way Dracula just freezes in place. And Dracula laughing and slapping Ganondorf looks really stupid to me. And of course, sometimes the general SFM look of the animation can distract me. It just looks weird at points. I don't know how else to explain it. Honestly, I think the weakest part of the fight though is the start. I don't really like the opening dialogue exchange. Ganondorf telling Dracula to get fucked is fine, but then he both calls Dracula a vampire and also says no man can challenge his power. As if a vampire was a man. What are you trying to say with this? Move, vampire, no man can challenge my power. You're a vampire, but you're also a man. This would be like if he talked to Thor and said, no man can challenge my power, God. He's not a man, he's a vampire, dumbass. But then it's weird because this was clearly done just so Dracula could say, what is a man? A miserable pile of secrets. Which first off is not even an accurate quote, he forgot the little. And secondly, why does he say this? Maybe it's a meta joke about how Castlevania also likes to put this quote in places where it doesn't fit, but come on, it just doesn't fit. This then leads to a horribly janky punch and then, I'm no mere man. And it's strange because I know why these lines are here. It's the payoff for Dracula's 2 lines later on, with the I'm no mere vampire either and the one about quirky bacon. But it doesn't feel as satisfying for me because these lines just don't fit at the start to me. Legitimately, you could have just had,
Your castle is lost, vampire. Vacate my throne. A mere man is sent to eradicate me? I'm no mere man.
And you'd have the same cohesion with the later lines. Oh, but you wouldn't have the fun little reference, which, as someone who gets the reference and finds the meme funny, didn't make it better, it distracted for me. Aside from that, I still just dislike the start of the fight. Ganondorf's 2 punches are janky as fuck, Dracula's slap is janky as fuck, Dracula laughing looks really janky, but then the Medusa heads come in and suddenly it's like, yes, I like it, this is good. Ganondorf fighting off the Medusa heads is a really cool scene. I like Dracula going to bite Ganondorf's neck and Ganondorf using the Triforce to get out of the bind. I like the incorporation of smash moves in this one scene, because it's just this one part of the fight, and they actually got the Warlock punch right, unlike last time, seeing as in Smash it is more of a backhanded punch than a regular slug. Though I should note that this fight technically uses even less of Ganondorf's power set than the last. He uses his smash moves as sword, becomes Ganon, and fires laser beams one time. But in terms of representing Ganondorf, they haven't done a bang-up job, but I do think it was done better even though he uses less powers, because giving Ganondorf his sword does go a long way, seeing as most of Ganondorf's boss battles involve a sword. And does make an impact as well, because Ganondorf full-on decapitates Dracula, which leads to this awesome shot of Dracula popping down in front of Ganondorf in his big bat monster form. But that has nothing on Ganondorf's transformation. The build-up, the glow of the Triforce, the explosion of energy, and then that fucking reveal that it's Ocarina Ganon, the best Ganon. This scene is just awesome. And the first half of the monster fight is really cool. Ganon smacks Dracula a bit, then charges, and Dracula just decides to match him full on in raw strength. There's this great shot of the two struggling. Unfortunately, the rest of the monster fight just amounts to Ganon cuts Dracula once and shoots a laser, and then Dracula nukes him, which is a bit more boring. Especially because Monster Dracula doesn't actually hit Ganon once outside of the nuke. Still, I think the way Ganon was portrayed in his 30 seconds of screen time goes a long way to making this film more like the character of Ganondorf than anything Bowser vs. Ganon ever did, with its tiny Ganon throws a stick and gets Vorge stick. But yeah, Dracula does his nuke, and there's this cool shot where the Triforce burns up and Dracula gets a cool line and looks nice and leads into this wicked ass death where Dracula gets one completely bitching line and rips Ganondorf in half. Yeah, I think the animation starts bad, but boy does it pick up into a genuinely really good animation, and my favorite Legend of Zelda episode we've gotten so far, unless Link vs. Cloud 2 tops it, which we'll have to see. And there's one thing else I want to say that this episode does fantastically, and it's something the SFM team are mostly fantastic at: facial animation. Mostly, I said mostly! Dracula oozes personality, and not just with facial animation, but character animation overall. Small things like Dracula brushing off his outfit at the start, and his overdramatic flair before shooting his fire attack, and even the pouting face he does while doing it, and his almost playful method of redirecting Ganondorf's own magic back at him really gets across his arrogance and how little he thinks of Ganondorf, while things like his reaching out to grab him and the way his decapitated body twitches all unhinged really get across the terrifying otherworldly feel of the character. It's not to say Ganondorf isn't well done too, his facial expressions perfectly capture the most iconic part of his look, the shit-eating grin, but Dracula steals the show for me. It really gets off the feeling that Dracula is both an arrogant shithead who's toying with Ganondorf for most of the fight, then becomes a monster and attacks him in ways specifically made to suffer, but then when Ganon comes out and actually really starts putting up a fight, it gets off the fact that Dracula can be serious and he will end you with a fuck-off nuke. And then he makes sure to kill Ganondorf in a way that gives the poor guy ample time to realize his Triforce is gone and feel the despair of knowing that his demise is at hand. I felt like I really got to see Dracula's character portrayed through this fight. He doesn't think much of the people he encounters, he doesn't think Ganondorf is a threat. He's also a genuine terror who exudes authority and an overwhelming presence, and when something comes up that's an actual threat to him, he doesn't fuck around, he will use his power to wipe it out thoroughly. When it's time for Dracula to posture, he postures. When it's time for Dracula to fight, he fights. Massive props as well to Stephen Kelly for his performance as Dracula, and while I'm at it, massive props as well to William T. Sopp for his performance as Ganondorf. I know this has been the Dracula show, but I also think Ganondorf was done extremely well too, and a lot of that goes to William's very good performance of the character. But I just think Dracula comes off as better because he has more personality than Ganondorf generally. I also like Dracula drinking the blood of Ganondorf after killing him, and... Is that fucking Kiryu? What the fuck? So with an analysis that I genuinely love, a conclusion I think is fairly solid, if nothing terribly special, but way better than Ganondorf's last, and a fight that starts bad but becomes really solid, where do I rank it? I can't lie to myself, this episode was way more impressive than I initially thought. I have to give this episode a 9 out of 10. I still don't think it's a 10, there are flaws I can point out, but I do think it's excellent. Do I think it's better than Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi? Not sure. The analysis for sure is better overall, but Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi doesn't have any moments I can call that as explicitly bad like I consider the first bit of Ganondorf vs. Dracula, and I do prefer Obi-Wan's analysis individually over Dracula or Ganondorf's, but really it's Kakashi's analysis that lets the episode down a bit. If anything, personal bias is going to make me prefer Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi, but I do think that does not get in the way of me liking Dracula vs. Ganondorf. So that was my review of every single other Legend of Zelda episode. It was quite a roller coaster now, wasn't it? And hopefully my opinion of Link vs. Cloud 2 will be just as high as my opinion of Dracula vs. Ganondorf. We'll wait and see. Hope you will enjoy it, and I hope you all have a good one.